In today's brief video, we're going to take some time and answer the question whether or not an increase in physical exercise or a decrease in caloric intake, food deprivation, dieting can lead to a release of cannabis or THC from your fat cells. So if you're exercising a lot or fasting or dieting, can that cause your stored fat cells to release THC? And we're going to do something we've never done before on this channel. We're going to actually look at some literature or research surrounding cannabis. I'm totally kidding. I've looked at plenty of literature on cannabis before. That's just to piss off the haters that come through here every now and then. But seriously, guys, this is a peer-reviewed article out of Basic and Clinical Pharmacology and Toxicology. Can physical exercise or food deprivation cause release of fat-stored cannabinoids? Now, this is important for two reasons, and it's a very curious question. On this channel, I've said before it can. I've made that claim that it could. I have a lot of people comment and ask, Dr. Frank, I have CHS. Should I not be exercising because is the exercise going to break down fat? And am I then going to release THC into my system and get sick again? Or for people who are going through cannabis withdrawal symptoms, should they be avoiding dieting or strenuous exercise at risk of releasing more THC into their system and ramping up withdrawal symptoms? Those are the two reasons why we would care. And in a real world application, drug rehabilitation centers also need this question answered, because if they have patients who are there for cannabis addiction and they're testing these patients and they keep testing positive, and the person's saying, whoa, I didn't sneak any cannabis in, I'm not smoking, it's because I'm exercising, is that a valid argument? And that's what we're going to look at in today's study. Now, this study began with a group out of Australia. They tested rats, and what they did was they exposed rats to THC, and they gave them then a hormone, ACTH. They injected them with it or exposed them to it. And this hormone increases stress and increases something called lipolysis, or the breaking down of fat cells. What they found in these rats when they were exposed to ACTH hormone, or if they were exposed to food deprivation, 14 hours of fasting, the serum levels of THC in the rats increased. So they said, oh my God, the breakdown of fat, the stress on the body from exercise or whatever releases THC back into the system. The same Australian group repeated this study with live humans, 14 humans, and instead of inducing ACTH hormone, they exposed them to 35 minutes of exercise, and I think it was 14 hours of fasting. And they found the same thing. They said, you know what? There is a statistically significant increase in serum THC levels, blood levels of THC. A new study came out looking at this in more detail, and I think a better study, but this study still has some major flaws, and I want you guys to pay attention to this when I talk at the end. And this might affect passing a drug test or something like that too, so very important. So it was in 2010, 2011, there was a group of people at a rehabilitation clinic for cannabis abuse, cannabis addiction in Norway. They took 6 participants for the study, 1 male, 5 females, all around the age of 30 years old with an average BMI of 20% body mass index, okay? Each of these users that they chose for this study, who volunteered, who chose to be part of it, consumed between 5 and 30 grams of hashish or marijuana. They spell it M-I-R-I-H-U-A-N-A. We'll talk about why that is later another time. That was actually to pin marijuana on people of, Mexican descent, but we'll go into that in another day with a history lesson. Anyways, so these people were consuming 5 to 30 grams of this stuff. For this study, what they did was they put these people in an isolated section of the rehabilitation clinic under 24-hour surveillance. Before beginning the study, they told them, okay, you're going to quit smoking cannabis day 1, and we're going to seclude you or quarantine you for 7 days, and we're going to do this study. And they tested their baseline serum plasma levels of THC and the byproduct of THC, THCOOH, the heroin of weed. Just kidding. If you watch my channel, you'll get the joke. In urine plasma levels, okay? And they tested that before and then after the study. So everyone had a baseline going into it. And throughout the course of the study, the participants were encouraged to collect their own urine as frequently as possible. And then they would come through and randomly take serum plasma samples to test THC levels, delta 9 levels in the blood. One subject E, messed up. Of the 6 people in the study, he forgot to take his own urine samples until about the 5th day into the study. Just found that kind of funny. I don't know why. Anyways, what they would do is somewhere between days 3 and 5, they would surprise these people and they'd say, okay, you're either going to go exercise right now for 45 minutes or you're going to fast for an entire 24 hours, a full day fast. It was one or the other. That's very important. One or the other. Immediately following the intervention, the exercise or the fast, they would take a urine sample and a serum plasma sample immediately following. And what they concluded was there was no statistical difference in this scenario. So no, they said these people, yeah, there was a little bit of elevated THC, a little bit of elevated THC OOH in the urine, but nothing of significant statistical value. So this study concluded, no, we don't believe that it's related. Fasting and exercise does not cause a release of THC from the process of lipolysis, the breakdown of stored fat cells. Few problems with this study. And these are big problems, in my opinion. Big problems. Before I tell you this, I just want to throw a random fact at you guys. Did you guys know? One THC cigarette, a Delta 9 cigarette, if you only smoked one and you weren't a chronic user, usually at 12 hours later, your serum levels of cannabis become almost undetectable. If you were to smoke one THC cigarette, the metabolite of THC, THC-OOH, could be tested in your urine for 1 to 2 weeks later. If you're a chronic cannabis user, you're using a lot of cannabis, they can test for THC and THC-OOH for up to 3 months down the line, depending on what they're testing for. Very interesting. Just wanted to throw that out there. Now, going back to this, what were the problems with this study that I saw? Well, one would be did these people actually lose any fat? Was there a lipolysis process that occurred? I worked at a very high-end gym, and we had a DEXA machine there, and we would scan people for fat loss. This is like a $80,000 piece of medical equipment that we would scan people for fat loss with. Typically, when people would come in and they would start dieting and exercising, and mind you, they were doing both things at once, typically they wouldn't start losing fat until after a week or two. They would shed off water weight. They might lose 5 pounds in the first 3 days, but none of that was actual breakdown of body fat. It was just water weight. Is 24 hours of fasting or cardiovascular exercise on a treadmill actually going to burn any significant amount of fat? I don't think so. I think that's just going to shed water weight. So that's my first major issue here. Issue number 2 is, why are we doing cardio? I would have much preferred to see strength training exercise, weightlifting, because we know that's a far superior form of exercise for building muscle and burning fat. That's been proven time and time again. Or a combination of strength training and treadmill. I would have liked to see that as well too. So that's my first major problem here. My second major issue is, if these people weren't on a regulated diet, like if they were eating just whatever type of food and they had elevated blood sugar levels and then they went to go work out, well, they're probably not going to burn any fat. They're just going to burn off the excess glucose floating around in their blood. So I think we would have needed to see a more controlled nutrition regimen for these people with an inclusion of blood sugar levels. Because are we just burning off excess glucose? Are we even touching the fat on these people? I don't think we are. What was the statistical change in their BMI? Or in BMI's junk. What would be a better way to track if these people lost any fat? That's what we're getting at. Were they blowing out ketones? We could have done ketone urine testing, ketone breath testing. I would have liked to see that, because that would have implied we were really burning fat. And then I would have liked to measure the levels of THC. Was it a long enough period of time? I think this study needs to be carried out over a series of a few days. And on top of that, is it just THC that we care about? Like, there's a lot of cannabinoids in the system, and we're just testing one. What about CBD levels? What about CBN levels? What about, other byproducts of cannabis or other cannabinoids? Are we testing for the wrong one? What if it's a different cannabinoid that's released during exercise and not just THC or the byproducts of THC? So I got a lot of issues with this study. And actually, at the end of the day, this study really means very little to me because of all those issues. It's really cool, though, that people are looking into this and starting to study this, because I think it's a question that we need to have answered with a legitimately really sound study. Wow, I really got to show off my intelligence today. I feel good about this video. I hope you made it to the end, and I hope you had fun looking at some of the research regarding cannabis.